great. Well, thank y'all so much for joining us today. Appreciate the couple that we've got already, and as our continued joiners, we have got a great Aggie Hackshop episode today. If y'all have not heard Nathan's podcast, I really, really, really encourage you to go back and listen to that. And we really wanted to have Nathan here to really talk about mergers and acquisitions. And he's an expert. He's an entrepreneur that has lived this multiple times. And so it's not someone that just says, okay, I've done it once or I've read about it, but he's literally written the book about it. So if y'all have not picked up Nathan's book yet, really want to encourage you to do that. But so I'm going to shut up. Y'all didn't tune in to listen to me, but Nathan, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. Thank you for letting us be here and to learn from you, and really looking forward to this deep dive.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate you guys inviting me to do this. This is something I'm truly passionate about, so I look forward to diving in. Just before I give you a little background on myself, for those of you that don't know me, whenever I speak, I like to do very interactive dialogue with individuals. So anybody that's in here, feel free to shoot questions my way, and that'll kind of stir the pot and allow us to deep dive into some things that are applicable within your own operations or companies that you know. But yeah, so on a basic level, been an entrepreneur, started my first company when I was at A&M, and grew that up. And then once I graduated, started some new companies. Always had a passion for entrepreneurship, and I had the opportunity to get into the M&A space and become a business broker. So did that. Kind of focused on consulting companies to position them to exit from the beginning. What we found is at that brokerage, roughly 70% of the companies that contacted us were not ready to actually exit for the valuation that they wanted. And so my position was to better align them and get their systems in place, standard operating procedures, we call it, get that in place. And typically that'd be anywhere from 6 to 12 months to get that all in order. And then they could sell at the valuation that they were looking for. So I was on that side and then stepped into the brokerage. So with that firm, I actually opened up the College Station location and the San Antonio location and started brokering deals, helping sellers sell their business. And so did that for a while with that group, and then went ahead and started up Graystone International. And we take a slightly different approach, but it's a very fun approach. We build relationships with buyers, and then through that, the sellers tend to come to us. So just set up our first billboard off of Highway 35 in Austin. That's exciting, costly, but exciting. And so running some neat campaigns just like any other business owner would, but we're doing it to help business owners sell their businesses. So but yeah, that's a little bit about us. Happy to dive in with any questions you guys have. Really, again, my focus is how to properly position a company to sell, and then also an area that I'm really passionate about and ready to exit. The book that I wrote talks about is what that process actually looks like, both kind of systematically, what to expect, but also emotionally. I think emotionally would be equally important to the step-by-step process. The emotional toll of selling the business is pretty substantial. It's something that you really have to brace yourself for early on. So yeah, if you guys want, let's dive into some Q&A. Happy to answer any questions y'all have.
Well, I'll just kick us off, Nathan. So I think a lot of people focus on the business side of it, the systems, the books, stuff like that. Since you said it's just as important, talk to us about the emotional side of it.
Yeah, so it's really during the deal flow, during the deal process. So from the beginning, something always leads somebody to calling us. They want to sell their business for a particular reason. They're ready to retire, there's health concerns, maybe a new venture that they want to start. Something leads them to that. So they're excited from the beginning. It's a very exciting time. And they typically have a number in mind, or at least a number in mind that they won't accept. They know what it's worth to exit for them. So that's a really fun time. That's a very high moment for them. And so let's go ahead and assume that we follow an evaluation that they're happy with, which a lot of times we do. especially as we get up in the market a little bit higher, things are a lot of fun and extremely exciting. We start marketing the business, and typically we get buyers coming in pretty quickly. So, within the first 30 days, we're starting to set up buyer-seller calls. So we're weeding through interested parties. We do buyer qualification forms and NDAs and all the legal stuff. But then if we see that they have the funds and the knowledge and the ability to actually acquire this company, it's a good fit, we'll set up buyer-seller calls. So for the seller, it's kind of like an, oh crap, this is happening moment. Like, this is, somebody actually wants to buy my company. Like, the concept's neat, but it's kind of a realization moment. And so that's very interesting and fun as well. And so typically those go great. Probably 60, 70% of the time, they're going to request additional information, and we're going to move down the road with them some. So the ones that aren't interested, we got to weed those out, and that takes somewhat of a small emotional toll on the seller as well, right? It's sometimes they get kind of distressed that, why do people not see the value in my company? Like, this thing is perfect. Why do they not see the value in this? But then they get the reassurance that someone does, and so we move down the road. As we get a little further down the road, though, we also find out that we build kumbaya. That's a term that we use a lot. Some of you guys that know me know I use that term a lot, but it's ultimately just buyer and seller getting along and having that synergy. And that's something that's really special to see. More excitement. Things are really, really good. And then we get to an LOI. It's a letter of intent. And that's where they're saying, okay, we talked about it. Here's what it actually looks like. And it's pen to paper, legal document, typically non-binding, but a legal document saying, we want to start due diligence. We want to investigate your business substantially. And pending all of this being truthful and us liking things, we're going to purchase your business based on these terms. That's when negotiations start. And it really gets real for a seller. And so that's whenever we start seeing emotions flare up. And, you've got this high kumbaya, and then the next thing you know, we're negotiating. And so we have to remember, this is a transaction, though, right? It's like buying a vehicle. You take a test drive, you fall in love with it, the salesman and you are vibing, getting along well. Then you want to start nickel and diming with the price. And they also have to make money as well. So imagine that, but it's your baby. It's not just a vehicle. It's your baby that you've worked, 10 or 20 or 30 years on. But yeah, move down the road, and each step that you get closer to that closing phase, emotions play a big toll in there. It's a lot of ebb and flows with it. But I can tell you this much, after you close the deal, you feel really, really good. You feel really good. And, we talk about it in the book, at the end of the book, but business sellers that actually accomplish the process of selling at a valuation that they're happy with is a very small percentage of, the 30 million entrepreneurs we have in our country. Very few actually sell. And it's something that's really beautiful to see. I've seen more grown men cry in my life through M&A than I've seen at funerals. I mean, it's a very emotional process. And that's the emotions to M&A.
All right, so I've got another question for you. Is how do you what are the biggest issues that you see with someone that is wanting to sell their business?
I mean, there's a lot. Probably the biggest would be either customer concentration or dependency on a seller. I had a guy call me this morning. Went to sell his business, and he sells crawfish, and he's one of the largest crawfish sellers and distributors in Texas. He's been in business for, I think, 13 years. And he was talking, praising his company. And I said, this is great. And he wants to know evaluation kind of right off the bat. And I said, well, if you were to leave these relationships, and he kept talking about how great his relationships were with buyers. And I said, if you were to leave, would those relationships leave? And he's like, well, I could transfer those over. And I said, are you sure about that? Because personal relationships don't just convey over always. that was something that's been established over a decade. How do you hand that over via contract or something like that? So that's probably one of the biggest things is personal relationships with customers and then customer concentration. Those are huge, huge, huge liabilities for a buyer. Think about a real estate investment. If you've done that, you can get a foundation checked, you can get the roof checked, you can get all that checked and make sure it's all free and clear. And then you've got some insurance as well to help out with any of that stuff with the business. I mean, you do your due diligence. You can have a third party come in and even help you with that, but there's a large portion of goodwill that's associated with that, and you want to reduce your liabilities as much as possible. So diversifying those few things is something that we always. That's the consulting we do, right? It's like 6 to 12 months of positioning this. Hey, let's actually get you out of the business and on the business. Like, stop talking to those customers every single day, and let's let your general manager or your partner or your assistant start handling some of those tasks. Or, hey, you've got, one customer that's, really anything over 30% of your revenue, which is typically those red flags. And, you've got a personal relationship with them. We've got to back off of that. We've got to get recurring income elsewhere. We have to get away from that one particular customer that's driving so much of your revenue. If that leaves, the ROI is completely shot for that buyer. And, we're typically talking about, many hundreds of thousands of dollars or many millions of dollars that they're spending. So that's really the biggest items that we see.
Nathan, what's that typical turnaround time for getting a business ready to sell? Like you mentioned earlier, if they come to you and they want evaluations maybe higher than what it currently is, how long does that take? How long is that process?
Yeah, so we get a phone call. It depends on the brokerage, right? Some brokerages you see process things a little bit slower. I mean, typically what we try to do is within a week turn this around. So within 48 hours, we pull a professional valuation on a company, build out a marketing plan, and then present that to the seller, the client, and pending their approval, we sign an exclusive listing agreement and it goes to market. So it's a pretty quick process for us. As far as the selling side, actually selling the business, a lot depends on the type of business it is, the industry and different things, the valuation that we're demanding, the multiple. But, typically what we see is somewhere around 5 to 6 months to sell your company.
And how long would it take if a company is not ready to sell? How long does that process take to get them to be ready?
Depends on their issues. Depending on the issues we're trying to solve. But that's what we found is 6 to 12 months. I think the longest we've had was 18 months. But that was pretty exciting. It was a family restaurant. So 6 months you can turn things around. You can put systems in place and make the balance sheet more appealing, the profit and loss more appealing. You can make some substantial changes in half a year that can honestly result in millions of dollars of valuation. We've legitimately talked to people for 4 to 6 months and increased valuations $3 million over that period of time. And it's not just valuation, it's also how quickly they sell, like how, if they can actually sell, how appealing it is. One of the worst things that we could do is put a company that's not properly positioned on the market, disclose, relatively confidential information to some buyer groups, and then it doesn't sell, and so it sits on the market for a long time. And so then these legitimate buyers relate that brand to an unappealing opportunity. And so even if they decide to sell a year or two later, private equity groups and family offices, they kind of are what they are. I mean, the new ones come into the market, but serious buyers typically stick around and continue buying. So you just want to put the right the right business on the market at the right time in the right way.
Nathan, have you ever had a business that was looking to sell, and then when you came in and started turning it around, you increased the efficiency and the profitability, that they changed their mind? They no longer want to sell, and instead they want to maybe do a succession plan to someone else?
So part of a little insider secret here. So in our consulting agreement, it says at the end of this term, pending that we get the valuation where it needs to be and we hit our goals and objectives, we will list the business. Because a lot of times they want to sell because it's, they feel like they're, and maybe they are putting 60, 70 hours a week in and blood, sweat, and tears, and they're not making the money they want to make. Switch a few things around and pretty quickly that changes. And there was a food distributor out of Houston that came to me and said, "Hey, I want to sell," and it was a wonderful brand. You guys are probably aware of this brand, very well recognized company. And he was personally in a kind of a tough position, and he said, "I got to get out." And he said, "I'll take $150,000 for this business. Like whatever." And the brand alone, I think, would be worth probably $3 or $4, maybe $5 million. But the revenue was excellent. It was absolutely excellent. But then he got there were some negotiations that kind of went south with some of his stores and big box stores. And so I said, "Hey, let's do some consult." This was early on, and I said, "Let me help you out, and then we'll get the valuation up to let's say $3 or $4 million, and let you get out, and then pay off your personal financial issues and all that kind of stuff." 30 days later, we negotiated a deal with the whole Dallas area with it was actually H-E-B, and then Austin Kroger, and got him back in all of those stores. That's what he had lost, and cash flow was so good that no longer wants to sell. And he went from breaking even or losing money. I think he was honestly losing money to a very high income. So I still give him a hard time, but I never got the listing. But we're decent buddies still. But I'm glad he's doing well. That's a good thing. But that was a good donation. That's a great point, Joe.
So what would be the top 3 things that you can do right now if you're thinking about growing your business or wanting to sell your business, let's say 3, 4, 5 years from now? What are the top 3 things that you can do right now, right? And what are the top 3 things that you typically do when you go into a business to help them, kind of get it ready to sell?
Yeah, SOPs, putting systems in place. Take the dependency off of yourself. It cannot be dependent on you. No personal relationship. You can still get along with people, chat with them, but have layers of systems in place. Don't let it be directly tied to you as the owner, because once you're gone, and that's a big liability for somebody. So that would probably be the first thing, is putting all of that in place. Making sure that accounts receivable is coming in quickly. You don't have really a ton of delayed accounts receivable. And then the financials. And so I think just making sure the books are really, really clean. And, if having consistent 3-year financials. So any buyer that comes in, they're going to ask for 3-year financials. So year to date, and then 2 or 3 years prior to that. And so making sure that is all really, really clean. So those are going to be profit and loss statements, balance sheets, and sometimes cash flow statements. So typically your CPA or your financial person can do that. So getting that properly positioned, showing year-over-year growth if possible, is really important, because you can put a ton of time into marketing your business and confidentially putting it out there and buyer and seller calls and all that stuff. But once you get into due diligence, it is due diligence, and these buyer groups will take extreme measures to make sure their investment is secure. And so making sure those financials match to what they're going to actually find out during their due diligence, super important. You lose a ton of trust and credibility if they don't match up. That's 2, but that's 2 really big ones, really, really big ones.
Nathan, but a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with, there are financial benefits of being an entrepreneur. And I'm not wanting to get anybody in trouble with the IRS or stuff, but sometimes personal expenses find their way onto the profit and loss. So how do you account for that?
Yeah. So actually what we said, that's a great point, Greg. So what we sell on is, we call it SDE, Seller's Discretionary Earnings. And EBITDA is used a lot of times, but SDE is what we typically use. And SDE is, you pull a typical profit and loss statement. That bottom line net profit is where we begin. We'll typically throw owner salary in there unless, that has to be replaced with a reasonable salary. And then depreciation, those kind of things are added back. And then also one-time expenses and personal expenses. So yeah, everybody, personal vehicles slide onto profit and loss statements or onto those balance sheets. Those payments will be added back. Any of those items, it happens all the time. Every company has it. Every company has personal add backs. I don't think we've ever had one that did not. We have a $24 million listing right now, and the books are very, very clean. But there's a Porsche sitting on the balance sheet, and the Porsche is not necessarily for new business. He claims it is, maybe it is, but the new owner would not need a Porsche to gain that same revenue. That happens all the time. We call it an add back, and that goes on into the SDE calculation.
Hey, Nathan, this is Will. I love what you're sharing, man. And I like the point about getting the business in the right shape and then putting it on the market at the right time. Could you speak to that a little bit in terms of what the market's looking like right now? Is it a good time to sell a business, with everything going on in the world, or just in general? I know it's going to depend on the industry if you own a lumber company versus an oil and gas company, but talk to us in general about just what you're seeing in the marketplace and maybe comparatively to some of the past few years.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely. So 2020, as you guys know, was a shaky year. A lot of companies out of necessity had to sell or try to exit. But buyers really, we always say they didn't pump the brakes, they put the car in park. The buyers that did buy, they were sharks. They were big groups that came in with cash, and they ate up companies that were in distress, knowing that once things turn around, they would do well. And so we had multiple closings last year. We actually had a really good year, but it was a feeding frenzy of sharks. And sadly, a lot of the companies were companies that had to step out. They did not have the financial capacity to make it through whatever was going to happen. And, it was an unknown for all of us. So last year was tough, but January 3rd, 2021, the phone rang, and things changed, and people were excited to exit. A lot of these companies were companies actually did kind of weather 2020 well, and they wanted to show that. And so, buyers started calling us up and saying, hey, new year, we feel confident about things, and 2021's been really, 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 really good so far. There has been some hesitation now, with some of the tax talk, capital gains tax talk that has pumped the brakes a little bit again, or causes some hesitation. People that have a really healthy company that are ready to exit, we're taking those listings on and saying, hey, let's get this done in 4 months. We believe that if any changes like that were to happen, it would happen January 1, 2022. Not legal advice, not tax advice, but that's what we believe. And so if you want to sell, now's the time. If you are looking to position the company to sell, it's almost more for cash flow basis, and kind of waiting to see how things happen. But if capital gains tax goes up, it's going to be tough for a lot of sellers.
Another question for you, Nathan. So I know that there are, obviously a lot of companies that need to be turned around in order to be sold. But I know that you, of course, won't be just taking on any company. So what are some of the red flags that your group won't even take on a client to start turning them around or to try to sell them? And it's just not worth the time, or it's near impossible.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm big on intuition. It's almost weird, but intuition, it's just simple dialogue with people. You find out a lot about them. And so typically the number one issue with selling a company is their ability to conform to what needs to happen. And so if they're not mentally prepared to make necessary changes, if they want to take a hard-headed approach, typically it doesn't work real well. So that would be the biggest hesitation we would have. But as long as somebody's receptive, they're willing to work with us, and they truly want to sell, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get the business there, we want to work with them. I mean, it's, we take a very agnostic approach, so it's not based on industry or anything like that. It's more based on, here's where you were, here's where you're at, here's where we need to be, and what will it take to get across that board. If they're willing to ride that ride and play that game, we'll do it with them.
I run into that issue a lot too, as well as clients, where you come in with a recommendation on things that I think could be done better, improve efficiency, improve this, improve that. What would be, for your world as well, the best way or the best approach that you found to convince a business owner that, hey, if you do this, one, you'll save money, and two, if you don't do this, you're losing out on a bunch of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually doing harm to the company.
Yeah. So,
what convinces that?
Yeah. So, you can't really convince them, right? They have to want to do it. But I think on that point, though, being very reasonable with them, running things across a test of reasonableness. A lot of times, whenever, say you're exiting for the wrong reasons, or you want a very inflated valuation, we run everything through a test of reasonableness. We say, okay, let's put yourself in a buyer's shoes. We're going to buy your company. What type of ROI would you like to have? And then I say, well, I want a 25% return. Okay. Here's your new debt service. Here's the operator you have to put in place to replace yourself, X, Y, Z. Return at the valuation that you're looking for is going to be a 6% ROI. And so just running things through a test of reasonableness, explaining it to them, that's really the best thing that we can do. And that's what leads us to finding out if they're really willing to do what it takes. The way we work on a commission basis. And so we have to have people that are committed to the process. And we talk about that in the book, but it's truly being committed to the process in selling. When you sign the dotted line, we're selling. Like we're going to find a buyer. We always do. We're going to get you the right offer. We're not going to, forcefully make you take a bad offer, but we're going to get you an offer. We're going to get what we talk about. And you need to be committed to that process. Even with the consulting side, even if it's improving the business for 6 months or 12 months or whatever that is, you have to be committed to that process. And, that dialogue early on is quite revealing typically.
You and when Matt had asked the question, I talked about how long it takes, for you guys to get it's about 48 hours to get back to them, and then on finding a buyer and such. But what's the average amount of time that the previous owner might stick around to consult to buy the new owner?
Yeah, no, another great question, Joe. It depends, right? So typically a smaller company, let's say anything under $3 million valuation, we're looking at 30 to 60 days, sometimes 90 days. And that's just a transition period. It's considered training. It's never really paid. It's just kind of part of the deal. However, larger transactions, a lot of times what we see is family offices or private equity groups coming in and doing rollover stock. And so they'll do an asset purchase all the assets of the company, and then roll over equity for the seller. And so, for example, we have a deal right now where we're rolling over 20% equity, and there's a 3-year employment contract with an extension option on it. And so that seller, when they came to us, they said, hey, I want to sell my business and want to be done. I want to spend time with my family. And so now that's changed. He got the number he wanted, and he got a very hefty salary. It's double what he's currently making. And they want him on for 3 years to ensure that everything's going to go smooth. He holds on to that 20% equity, and their plan is in 3 to 5 years, utilizing assets and networks from both sides to grow that company and to maybe double the size it is now, and sell at an increased rate. So the seller actually has 2 wins then. He'll make $20 million at closing, and then get paid a hefty salary thereafter. And then when the business sells again, he'll get 20% of that, and dividends in the meantime. So transition periods vary on the size of the business, but typically what we'll see in anything under 3 million or so is a 30 to 90 day training period.
Well, Nathan, we got about 10 more minutes, so let's see if we can take maybe 1 or 2 questions, if anybody else has got anything, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Cool. Sounds good.
Nathan, how do you see Will asked earlier, the market change? I think there's a shift. I think you may have mentioned this on your podcast with Aggie Growth Hacks of the acquisition entrepreneurship. How is that going to play a role moving forward?
Yeah, so that's become really mainstream, if you will. So we did talk about this quite a bit, Chris and Greg. When I was at A&M years ago, the focus has been startups, and startups are great. I mean, I started with startups, right? And I'm fascinated by startups. And as an entrepreneur, every morning I have a business idea, right? It's something that we love, but we can't help but do that as creators and entrepreneurs. But acquisition entrepreneurship is not something that's really actively taught in the education system. And MBA programs are really starting to push M&A and acquisition entrepreneurship a lot. You're seeing it a whole lot. But undergraduate degrees, that's just something that's not really discussed. And that's it is becoming more mainstream. That's something that we're also trying to push really hard is, in our networking and people that we know is go buy a company. I mean, the SBA offers such incredible opportunities to help entrepreneurs, and, so many startups sadly fail for whatever reason. And with proper due diligence and everything, acquisition entrepreneurship, day one you have income coming in, day one. And so let's take for an example, typically a multiple on an average service company is a 3 multiple. And so you buy a company for $900,000. It's almost $1 million. It's a lot of money. But that means you're also making $300,000 a year. What you're going to need for that is roughly 10% down, depending on your credit and a few different things. But typically you can get 10% down, negotiate with them a little bit. So 10% down, looking at $90,000 investment. Most people with startups can rake together $90,000 from friends and family. And so with $90,000, you instantly start making that $300,000 a year. So you don't have to build up the customer base. You don't have to build up the brand. You don't have to, a lot of people go buy franchises and pay all of these substantial franchise fees, and nothing against franchise. Those are great for the right people. But, business, typical businesses, private businesses, ongoing concerns are incredible opportunities for business-minded people. And it provides retirements for hardworking entrepreneurs as well, right? There's 2 sides to that. It's a great opportunity for the buyer, but it also pumps some energy into the entrepreneurial ecosystem by providing a retirement for a hardworking entrepreneur.
Yeah, in that same thing for just a minute, Nathan, if someone's interested in acquiring a business, where should they start outside of the financial? I mean, where do you go to to learn more about these opportunities to buy?
Yeah, I think it depends on the level of expertise you have. And if it's your first company, I would probably recommend getting with a broker that works with buyers. That's something we do. And it's they'll let you know what to watch for, how to structure the deal, when to negotiate, when not to negotiate. There's some good resources out there as well on acquisition entrepreneurship, what to actually look for and what to push for. But if it's your first go round, I would really recommend getting with a broker or somebody that's done it before. There's some good audit groups out there, somebody that's done it before that can help you out. However, if you're experienced and you've done a few deals, you know what to look for. Honestly, calling private entities. You find the demographic that is more likely to be selling. That's, right now it's the baby boomers. Probably over the next decade, we're going to see baby boomers exiting and retiring. And so calling those companies, maybe reputable, get on Google, right? Say you want to buy an HVAC company because in Texas, it's hot. And so get on, type in Austin or College Station HVAC companies, look who has the greatest reviews. And then do a little research on the internet, find out who the owner is, try to get maybe LinkedIn, find out how old they are. And, if they're in that demographic, it might be worthwhile shooting them a message on LinkedIn or sending them a letter. Typically something like LinkedIn is best, and say, hey, we'd like to chat business with you. Let's set up coffee. And through that, you can kind of understand more about their business, and also if they might entertain the idea of actually selling. You keep brokers out of the deal, which as a buyer, is more lucrative to you, right? Because there's going to be probably less negotiations. There's no broker fees associated with it. So it's a little more groundwork, but you might be able to catch yourself a better deal if you know what to look for.
That's great. Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions?
All right, Nathan. Well, I think that's I think that's you provided so much value and some really honest discussion with this. How can people, as they're listening to the replay or anything like that, how can they get in touch with you, and where can they pick up your book? Do you autograph these books and send them out? But I mean, seriously, you're such a wealth of knowledge, and to be able to coach people through, especially this acquisition entrepreneurship.
It's such a new topic. There's so much to discuss that we didn't get to even cover. And so I love having conversations around this. It's something I'm truly passionate about. Everybody in our office and everybody that we network with are truly passionate about this. So free of charge, we love to chat about this stuff. So yeah, you can email me. It's nathan@graystonecorporate.com. It's GRAY. Graystonecorporate.com is our website. You can learn more on there. And then the book, Ready to Exit, you can purchase that at readytoexit.net. There's more information. We have a podcast on there as well. Weekly, we upload new episodes where we're talking about acquisition entrepreneurship and how to properly position your business to sell. We cover a lot of good topics on there as well. So Ready to Exit, all spelled out, .net, and then GraystoneCorporate.com is the best. You can always add me on LinkedIn or any social media platform as well, and happy to chat with whoever.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to again thank Nathan for his graciousness and the wisdom that he's provided today. Also, if you are interested, I want y'all to put on your calendars June 18th. 10 o'clock. That'll be the next Aggie Growth Hacks Hackshop, and we're going to be reaching out to. I've got to confirm it this week, but we'll be reaching out to Jeff Ross, who is an entrepreneur that has grown multiple companies, and we're going to be talking about how do you grow your sales, how do you actually define your perfect customer, the customer that you like dealing with, and the customer gets maximum value out of you, and how do you actually boost sales? I know that's within the last year, that's been a struggle for a lot of companies, and so we want to talk about that. So Thank y'all again so much for joining us today. Nathan, thank you for your wisdom. And if y'all haven't checked out the book, make sure that you do that right away.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. And Greg and Chris, I appreciate what you guys are doing for the entrepreneurship community. It's really great. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all.